Welcome to the podcast, Holly. It's so lovely to have you here today. I would like to just ask how you got to be where you are today and tell us a little bit about your journey.
Okay. Well, I guess my journey started back when I was 25. Um, I mean, maybe it started a long time before that, right? But I really got started then. I had taken a series of shots and the doctor suggested it would be a good idea for me to take it was for the HPV shot.
Mm.
And it's a 3-dose series, so that's why I say it that way. And the first and second dose, if there was any I didn't notice anything, but at that time, I was also not as connected to my body. So by third dose, my body was pretty loud and clear about the fact that it had kind of reached its plateau level,
Right.
which I didn't understand what was happening at the time, and it took me about 4 years to even make a connection. I had up a pretty big wall too, because it's not like the idea didn't cross my mind, not organically. My mother brought it up, and so naturally I shot it down. Why would the doctor give me anything that would hurt me? And
Mm.
she's like, "Well, but you've been in the hospital in and out." So what had happened was within 2 weeks of that last dose, I began having these it just started with one symptom right after the other until it was a snowball effect. And it started with like me feeling like I was being punched in the stomach in the middle of the night and I couldn't breathe. And I was like, well, maybe it's an ulcer. So I went and had that checked out and they were like, no, it's not that. But then it grew into not being able to eat. And then if I did eat, everything just, I was in the bathroom all the time. I lost 40 pounds that I didn't have to lose in two
Wow.
months. Yeah, and, some people were like, "Oh, that's great, 40 pounds in 2 months, sign me up." I'm like, even if you had it to lose, it's just not healthy, and it's a real big red flag if something like that's happening, right? And I know maybe people were just trying to make light of it, but that just was like, ugh, it was so hard, and, so anyways, I was in and out of the hospital, in and out of doctors, nobody's making any connections, it's psychosomatic, it's stress, I did, all the tests for different autoimmune conditions, and thank God none of those had markers, but the process to figure that out is kind of grueling as well for anybody who's had to go through that. I empathize with you. But at the end of it, I remember the doctor just sitting across from me going, "Are you under any stress?" Like he just didn't have any other, solutions to give me. And looking back at it, he wasn't from this country and I could see something different in his eyes, but you could tell his scope of practice only let him speak about certain things, right? So he was like, all I can say is just everybody's situation with this is different. They basically just chalked it up to IBS and then said everybody's situation with this is different and you're just going to have to figure it out what works for you, which
Wow.
that turned out to be a blessing. But because I was at a point in my life then where had they had a medication to give me for it, I would have taken it. And realistically, when I look at all of the things now, I have a better understanding and I'm not diagnosed because I don't, need to be to know what was going on when I look at things. But it really fell more under and still falls more under the POTS category. Because
Mm.
my heart was racing. There was a lot more going on than just the GI stuff. But that's what stuck out so much for me because of how much it affected my stomach and how much I always felt nauseous and struggled with appetite out of nowhere, which was like never an issue for me. So, it affected my whole life. I couldn't work. I had no like desire to cook and that there's all these things that just really, you just don't realize how much it can just bring you to this point. And I felt like one part of my body breaking down and then the other and the other. Like I could feel things going on with my heart. And I remember sitting at we have I don't know where you live, but we have these grocery store chains down here called Publix. And, they have these maybe all grocery store chains do. They have like the little thing that you do your arm to check your heart. And I just remember feeling so off and my heart pounding so rapidly that I would sit down in it and it would be like, get to the ER basically, but then I'd
Wow.
get there and it'd be like, oh, psychosomatic. Um, anyhow, so that led me to a road of just trying to figure out how can I help myself get better? Because at this point, at this rate, I just was like, how much longer can I live? I mean, how many more things are going to break down? I can't just continue eating my own body, which I could see that my body was doing. Surviving off of myself is what it felt like it was doing. I mean, my whole body shape changed, and it just didn't even look the same. My cheeks were sunk. It was rapid and fast and brought me to my knees and was a really dark period of time in my life. And then somebody suggested craniosacral therapy. And I
Oh,
just remember being like, what? And I looked it up, and it just kind of sounded a little ridiculous. Like somebody's going to put the weight of a nickel or, 5 grams of pressure on my arm and I'm just going to like feel better. I mean, it just, but I had nothing to lose and I was desperate and kind of thank God, I guess, because not that I was like boxed out of it, but again, had they given me a medication at that time, I would have taken it and that wouldn't have even been the solution, right? At all. It wasn't even IBS. So it's like, where would I be now if I had done that? And I'm 38 now. So this was 12 years ago almost.
yeah.
So I went in for my first session. And at this point in my life, I was pretty numb, pretty disconnected. Like there really wasn't much that I felt for people, and I could watch things and feel emotional, but I wasn't going to cry about it, and if things, and so much had happened in my life that I almost wore it like a badge of honor that I could just drove through, and just be
Yeah.
strong and hard. And that I didn't think of myself that way, but it's how I got through. And that was beginning to buffer and break. And my first session, I cried and I wasn't aware of what it was tied to. And I didn't need to know, and the practitioner didn't need to know. What was awesome was I left my first session and I had an appetite I hadn't had in 4 months. And that was
Wow.
huge for me. And I thought, okay, there's something to this. And she had told me, there's something about a compound effect. So I continued to see her for a little bit and I just felt like I saw her another 4 times and I felt like I was mostly better, but I had run out of funds, I wasn't working. This wasn't insurance covered. So that was what I could afford. But the fact that it brought me that much, I was just, from the first session, I was like, what did you do to learn about this? How did you go about this? Is what I meant to do. So I
Yeah.
thank God every day for just the path of that, because that's what led
Yeah.
me to this. I personally was so profoundly impacted that I just wanted to tell the world. And so for years I did, I ended up moving from Florida at that point up to New Jersey. And it took me a few years. I went to massage therapy school, graduated from that. And I loved working with the fascia. And I was so fascinated with working with my hands and the body. And I was doing Reiki. And so for me, I felt like this is very similar, I bet. I mean, from a practitioner to a person, I'm like, it's gotta be,
God.
and I kind of just settled with that and it's nothing wrong with that. But in my head, I had an end journey point and I was like, I'll stop here. This is good. And it was good. It served a point. But I now know so much more about the fascia and the body. And I would love working in the session. My eyes would get closed and I'd fall into this place that I now know is this space where the fascia is communicating. And that can be done through all sorts of body work. But what I have found is when I was in massage therapy mindset, I would go, oh, okay, we know like deep pressure. Everybody's expecting like, hard, blah, blah, blah. I remember even being upset if a practitioner didn't do it like hard enough, Because then I'm like, you're not getting to the deep tissues. What I have found is that it's actually funny that if you can go a little softer, the fascia will open up and that's what's holding all of the muscle, right? And so when the body feels in charge and it can lead, it's not painful for the practitioner. And I mean, not that I'm over here doing massages anymore, but I've noticed myself doing myofascial techniques and I'm like testing myself out because what happened was I got hurt. And I was
Mm.
not, they say an average massage therapist, when I went to school 10 years ago, they said the average lifespan was 3 to 7 years, but that had like doubled because they were starting to teach body mechanic techniques, which, maybe they've gotten better over the last 10 years. They were teaching some things, but in general, people don't know body mechanics. So I don't know
Yeah.
how much better it could be. But that being said, I'm hypermobile. And that has played a huge role in things that I didn't understand. So my wrists and stuff will naturally and I'm like
Yeah.
eating the tissue because you're going to die. I know you'll give in eventually. And meanwhile, I'm hurting myself. And meanwhile, there's other techniques. And I knew myofascial techniques, but I didn't fully understand how to listen to the body. So what happened was I got hurt and my body was like, hey, remember that this wasn't what we got into this for? This isn't what we
Oh,
got into this for. So I was forced to take a break. COVID happened. Well, I got pregnant. COVID happened. We were living in New Jersey at the time, me and my husband, and we decided we need to move. So we moved to Florida. We wanted just to be in a place where, we were living in a basement apartment, which was lovely and wonderful that we had that, but it just being in lockdown and we needed more, and we could
yeah.
at that time get more in Florida. So we did that. And then obviously there was a period of time where the states, like nobody was working in the states. So to get one state to another to transfer my license so I could begin, this work,
Oh,
what happened
yeah.
was I understood what could happen with the body when your threshold has been met. And I know that that's different for everybody, and not everybody even knows where their threshold is. So while you might think your body is strong and blah, 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 and you might not even be considering that certain things could throw you over the edge, it could be emotional, it could be physical, it could be a shot, it could be, and
Mhm.
so I think sometimes people don't consider that. And I found myself feeling like this is the time that I have to tell people what happened to me, because I didn't tell people what happened to me because it just felt like it would become a fight. I wasn't trying to fight, but I got to this place where I thought people need to understand that if a bee sting can affect Sally in a way that makes her possibly die, or if she has a peanut that she can die, but I can do, or deodorant affects me differently than you, or you use a different shampoo. Like, we understand the body is different in these aspects. We see the commercials on TV all the time for all the different other things that can be wrong. And so I just wanted people to understand, hey, friends, I know you know what has happened to me, but did you know this is the reason why? And I want you to be aware, because I just can see where this thing is going, and I just didn't want people to feel that they were forced to do something that could throw their body over the edge, especially when so many people were already so nervous system capacity met.
Yeah.
And I also just wanted to hold space for people who were getting gaslit when that did happen. And so I found myself messaging people all over the world, basically, because my algorithm was showing me, and I just didn't want these people to feel the helpless hopelessness that I felt. And, a lot of them really did feel that way and maybe still do. And I also just wanted them to know there was some way their body could feel better. So
Mm.
I found myself like hooking people up with craniosacral therapists all over the world. Just I didn't even know who they would be. And, it does matter who you see, and that but
Yeah.
at some point, it just got to a place where I was like, what are you doing? This is what you were supposed to do. I'm like, now is. And so, yep, I went and finished what I started and began doing craniosacral. And then my path led me to working on not just adults, which for me, it was all, I just wanted people to know their bodies could heal themselves. That the body was innately designed, and that when it has what it needs and it feels listened to, that it can naturally unwind and it can do what it needs to do to heal. That has been my number one goal from day one. But naturally, as life would unfold, that's why it's just so beautiful that this even became a thing in my life. I had my son, and we had, I had this envision of having this beautiful home birth. We had the midwives, we had the doula, the hypnobirthing, blah, blah, blah. I did not succeed in that, and that's okay. My cervix just did not dilate, which I now feel is very fascia related and trauma related, and just a lot. And my not being able to like surrender, and just, it was a lot. That
Yeah.
being said, physically, he got stuck and I was not dilating. And no matter what we were doing, he needed to be C-sectioned. And that, out of my long list of birth things that we handed to everybody that we had to go to the hospital, that was not, we had to do it. So afterwards, he was such a happy baby. Like, we look at pictures and like always smiling. He was laughing, super charismatic. but he was also super passionate. Like I remember people being like, "Oh, your baby's so happy." And I'm like, he's passionate. Like when he's happy, you know it. And when he's not, you know
You
it.
know.
Nothing has changed. He's 6.5 now. But what has changed is that there were signs of massive airway issues when he was born. So I deal a lot with babies and children now, as life would have it. And I look back at my journey with him, and our midwives did tell us he had, his lip was like up here. And when you could see the frenulum for his lip, and we'd never, it was like down to his gum. My midwife was even like, I've never seen quite this before. And this was still kind of new, even that 6.5 years ago, to even really have people assessing for these things. So she looked at that. She had mentioned, I think, even the tongue. We were having breastfeeding latching issues. It was hurting a lot. I had 2 different lactation consultants. All of my dreams were going out the window. And I ended up feeling like, okay, well, I'll just exclusively pump. Like we didn't do a lot of things with him. And I just figured I'm not going to snip him for this either. We'll just like leave that alone. And if the only issue is that he can't breastfeed, I'll figure it out. But I didn't know that wasn't the only issue. So not only was that a miserable journey for me, because it was, having to be tied to trying to keep my supply up and doing it every couple, it's
Oh, it's
a lot. It's a
exhausting.
whole separate
Yeah.
job. You can't
Yeah.
go anywhere. It's like,
Yeah.
but we kept that up for 7.5 months. We had to,
Wow.
mix
Good for
things to
you.
keep him going, but it was still really hard,
Yeah.
and he would, the worst was getting through a whole thing of milk, and then he would projectile spit up the whole thing. And it was like, what the heck? And he was like, fine. There were a couple times he was very, very inconsolable. And there were times where he would arch his back, and I would try to like have
Oh,
him on my legs like
yep.
this, and he would jump so hard. And I remember my C-section scar just it looking like I was
Oh,
pregnant again because he had basically just beat me up in that area. And all of that was restriction in his fascia. All that we could see
oh,
here was stuff what you see here is just what you see on the most outer part that you can see.
yeah.
I see in pictures how he had like a smirk. It was super
Mhm.
cute. That's tight fascia. He had buccal ties. So
Oh.
anyways, there's so
Huh.
much that our journey has continued and still continues to blossom and show us. He's in a palate expander now because what happened was while I noticed he was mouth breathing as a baby, I thought that was cute. I thought the fact that he snored was cute. I didn't realize he couldn't really breathe. I didn't realize the spitting up was also because he couldn't breathe. That's why we had to
Right.
sit him in certain like I listen to certain things now and I'm like, wow, I'm almost embarrassed. And I posted a lot of stuff. So now I'm like, not like post a lot. So I need to go back and like go back. I want to delete. I don't want anyone to know. I'm embarrassed, but I leave it because it's reality. I didn't know then what I know now. I know all these red flags now. And we're working on it, on building his palate so that it's not going up into his nose, so that it can expand, so his face can grow the way it needs to, so his brain has the room it can grow into. Because this is
Right.
also affecting his brain body connection in a lot of other kids. And so, when they're still wetting the bed at 5, 6, and you're wondering what's going on, a lot of times it's just that they're not getting the great sleep we think they're getting. Their body's not
Yeah.
registering it. So, yeah, journey in a nutshell. That's the long thing that has led me to where I'm at.
So much is coming to me from all that. First of all, I would like for people that don't know, for you to explain what the cranial
Mm,
it is and what the fascia is, because a
so
lot of
good.
people don't know yet, right?
That's so true. So I forget that because I'm in like my bubble over here and I live in
Yeah.
Sarasota, Florida area. And it's been amazing because when I first learned about it, it was like nobody knew what it was. Now I don't have to talk about it as much. And people are like, oh, yeah, yeah, but they still don't get it. So what it is, I wish I had my little cranium guy with me, but we have 22 different bones in the cranium. And a lot of people are under the impression that they fuse together. They're not completely fused. There's a space between them that your cerebral spinal fluid, I'm sure people have heard of that before. I mean, if they get like, what is it, an epidural, like, there's all these
Yeah.
things. They've heard of it, but they don't really know what it is or what its job is. It's a pretty It's a pretty important thing, but it runs all throughout all of the sutures in our cranium, down our spine, into your sacrum. So we're all, if you're sitting on a little pool of your cerebral spinal fluid. And just a little fun fact, your cerebral spinal fluid is actually derived from the amniotic fluid from when you were in your mother's womb. So there's a
Oh,
lot that goes on with
interesting.
that. That's a whole other subject we could get into.
Yeah.
So that carries information, and it is what nourishes and informs your nervous system, your spine, your brain. It's what your brain is literally like floating in right now. And it is, they discovered in 2013 that you have something called your glymphatic system with a G. And what it is that your cerebral spinal fluid actually bathes and washes your brain while you sleep. Probably one of the biggest reasons that it's important we get that really good sleep. And whatever is not needed, toxins, proteins, emotions, memories, cellular debris, whatever you have, the body discards of it into the lymphatic system. And then through the lymphatic system, it goes out. What happens though is that obviously, just even things like in utero, right? Our cranium is growing in there. And depending on how much, and I'm not saying mom doesn't have room, our bodies are innately designed, but there are fascial restrictions in a lot of our bodies. And these really can make it where maybe baby gets to a certain size and like now they're like stuck in this position for most of the time. Like they're trying to move, but this kind of stuff can cause, either things like torticollis, plagiocephaly. So torticollis is like when their neck is stuck to a certain side. Plagiocephaly is like when they have a misshapen head. And then also the bones, when they come out, they're soft and they're made to overlap when you come out through the vaginal canal. And then they're made to, the fascial system, the fascia is the connective web of tissue that holds everything together. I think for a long time, we've been working under the concept of the body with bones and muscles. And the
Yeah.
fascia has only recently been discovered as something being like a big deal. I mean, they knew it existed, but I think it was around 2019 that they said it was the new organ of the body. And since then, it's like huge buzzword. I mean, I think it is. I see it
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yes.
It's definitely gotten a lot louder since I've been aware of it. I remember
Yes.
when I was in massage therapy school asking what a knot was. Like we all, have knots and what's a knot? And they were like, well, we don't really know yet, but it's basically where the muscle doesn't have enough oxygen to the tissue,
Mm.
right? There's not enough blood flow. So that's what our job as a massage therapist is to like bring blood flow. That's why the redness we see is good. We talked about fascia. There was myofascial release courses, but
Right.
it wasn't the crystalline structure that they know it is now. They understand now it carries memory. I mean, from my perspective, from what I've seen in my own world and as a practitioner, it's like a quantum computer. And it is the
Mm.
thing that is holding all of the memory of every experience you've ever had. It's what's then, your cerebral spinal fluid, that fluid that's flowing, is extending into the peripheral nerves of your connective tissue. So everywhere throughout your body. And that's what's informing your nervous system of how to react. So we're talking even like primitive reflexes, right? And a lot of times we've got even adults that are walking around with retained primitive reflexes. How many people yeet when somebody walks into a room that they weren't expecting? And they're like, "Ugh." So many people. That's a infant reflex. That's Moro. Now, it's not to say that, or Moreau, depending on how you pronounce it, whether that might have been integrated. It's not to say that it wasn't, but sometimes we go through traumatic experiences again and they need to be reintegrated. And if they're not, this keeps your nervous system in a state of fight or flight, which then makes the fascia hardened, which then tightens in certain areas. And wherever we're doing things over and over and over again. So as a massage therapist, we would think of, okay, if someone's driving all the time, someone's doing blow drying, they're going to be tight in these areas if they're doing, golf or baseball. Like, these things based on repetitive movements. But what happens is that fascia has compensation patterns that might have started even from in utero. And this even went through infancy and toddler. And your body is so smart and wise that it will compensate and it will work. And we've been not realizing that some of these things, like when a kid is klutzy or clumsy and, might be something going on with their nervous system or their reflex retention. We've not ever looked at that, or maybe it has something to do with their airway. This is all like new, right? But give it
Mm.
another like 10, 20 years, and this is going to be a whole new way we look at things. Because
Right.
if that fascia is holding everything together and it's tight, even like from birth, a lot of babies are tight in their diaphragm area. So, like right in this area,
Yeah.
because we grew like that, right?
Right.
Their bodies need to know that they can expand. So, a lot of times,
Oh,
my work is just helping their bodies safely expand and listening to where their fascia is restricted and helping their body move. Because without that, maybe they'll skip crawling, which now I believe the American Association of Pediatric, they decided to say that it was no longer a milestone that was needed, which is like huge in my world. That's a red flag. And if
yeah.
parents that's a pretty big deal. But sorry,
Go ahead.
as a parent of a child, when I didn't know what I know now, if my kid had started walking and didn't crawl, I would have been like, look at my baby. He's so smart.
Yeah.
He's so strong. He was lifting his head. We thought he was so strong. That neck
Mm.
tension was not strength.
Right.
It
Yeah.
had a lot to do with tone, which has nothing to do with strength as well, and had a lot to do with just, his fascial state of being. And there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. And so the fascia holds everything together and it can make bones in the cranium restricted. We
Mm.
have been pulling teeth. We've been doing braces. We've been softening foods. These are all things that have been playing into, and we've had trauma that we're not dealing with. These are all things that are living in the body that are genetically telling the next generation, we don't need to be this wide. We're going to be smaller.
Ah,
We're going to grow in.
right.
But what's happening is that these babies aren't, we're not giving them the same foods. They're doing baby foods, they're pureeing, they're doing all this, the pouches. And I get it. I had a kid that refused a lot of the things. A lot of the things he was refusing was because his nervous system was overwhelmed and these
Right.
other things were easier. Same thing with repetitive foods. It was easier for his nervous system to assimilate what was going on. A lot of that had to do with the fascial tension in his mouth.
Mm. Interesting.
So it's very interesting how all of that plays into the body.
The first thing that's coming up to me as a trauma therapist, to put
Hmm.
that hat on for a moment, is that I always tell people like neuropeptides go down your spinal fluid and attach to different organs like your skin or your muscle. Now, what's coming to me is that it's not even about the organs, it's the fascia that holds like the memory of
Because
the
the
trauma.
fascia wraps around every single fiber, nerve, organ, bundles of muscle fibers, bundles and bundles.
Right.
So it's literally this web, right? And you're correct. It's not the organ so much as it just from a massage therapist. It's not the muscle. It's the
Right.
fascia. And
Yeah.
if uh, wherever the fascia gets tight, and it tends to get tight in certain areas that I have found that's where emotional things will then go. And
Hmm.
then it brews from there. And, you
Right.
could be tight here, but just like if you had saran, it's going to
Connected.
tighten up everywhere. And your fascia, one of the main fascial lines in your body runs from your tongue down to your toes.
Ah,
So when you
neat.
consider that, it's wrapping through all of those internal
Yeah.
organs. And, we could be doing things down at, my job is to feel in very lightly to where these restrictions are. And to be honest with you, I have found that the fascia does amazing things when you're barely touching the body because
Right.
it's so sensory rich and so perceptive that there's even a field outside of the body that I think your fascia is actually aware of. And it
Hmm.
begins to tense and tighten when people even get into your bubble.
Right.
I think that like it's funny because I have found I can barely be touching people and hands off the body and they're having things go on with them. But what happens when my hands are on is that I tell people it's like if you can imagine putting your hands together and then pressing them and then separating them just barely so that your skin is just barely touching itself.
Yeah.
That is a space that your body really wants to be hung out within. And it's like, let me show you a thing or two that I can do. But we're not doing that. Like, we don't even touch ourselves like that. Everything, even our
Right.
partners, everything we do is a much different touch. It's heavier. This is a practice. Even as a practitioner, it's taken time to learn how to make sure I'm not only lifting my hands, like I'm not sinking. This is totally, I'm not just laying my hands on you. This is not Reiki of just, I'm lifting because I'm waiting for that tissue to respond. And there are times it wants a little bit more pressure and times I literally have to lay off for it to let me in further. And it's amazing what you can feel when you're in that space. There is a certain mechanoreceptor that turns on for the nervous system when it's barely touched like that. And it's
Right.
almost like it just knows it's being sat with and being
Right.
witnessed.
Yeah.
I kind of have likened it to my whole life, even as a child. Maybe this is where this comes from. I don't know, but it seems to have resonated with a lot of people. So maybe a lot of us have felt this way. I didn't like to have people see me cry. So I can imagine it feels like being a child and like going to go find somewhere to cry so that nobody sees you, so that you can just let it out. And someone coming to sit with you, and not because they want to say anything or do anything or change anything. They're literally just like sitting there with you. And when that
They're there for
happens,
you.
you just like almost can't even help but cry harder. It's like, oh man. And I feel like that's a nervous system response, right? Because
Yeah.
you're able to just be sat with. And that is something we don't even do for ourselves.
Yeah.
And not that we can't, but when somebody else does that for you, there's this field and it literally allows the nervous system to unwind, and the fascia can unwind, and it doesn't need the pressure. It doesn't need the force. In fact, I think the body in general is kind of sick of being told what to do. I think our
Right.
like, even I have, autistic nonverbal children that I work with, and sometimes they don't want to be touched, and that's okay. They have still
Right.
had changes in what's happening, but that's because there's more going on with our intention. And when we combine that with what we feel with our hands, that's just extra. I think it's amazing that we can feel where somebody's body is like, just hold me here for a second. You don't even have
Just
to
to be
like press.
safe.
Don't tell me what to
Right.
do. Don't press and just literally just hold. You'd be surprised.
Yeah. Yeah. Just to be in that safe space, right? And that's where we can grow. Yeah.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Hmm.
In your opinion or experience, why do some people stay stuck and they just don't move into that shift or change
Oh,
or
I love this question.
heal? Yeah.
There's a lot of reasons for that. What's the biggest one? Let me think of how to word this. Sometimes we find safety in um, what's the word? Not reality, but a version of ourselves that we've been living. It's a story we've had for a long time, and it, though maybe traumatic and true, it's ours, and we have like identified with it. I think that shift is hard for people to surrender to letting go of because it's a little scary. They
Right.
don't exactly know who they're going to be on the other side. And it also means that they have to possibly live up to a better version of themselves when it may be a little bit safer to hide behind that story, even if they don't realize that's what they're doing, right? Like they're not propelling forward in life in certain areas because it's safer to hide behind this being the reason why you can't. And it may very well be so true for some people. Like they've got physical things that are like valid on paper, very true. That belief and that repetitive story lives alive in the fascia, and it's constantly telling your body what state to live in. So I think that a lot of the power comes from taking our power back in that, and that's a shift that goes through a lot of layers that have to come off and a lot of things that have to sometimes change, like relationships, jobs, standards, boundaries. And all of that is
Yeah.
pretty scary. So, speaking your truth, but this is the kind of work too I have found. Like, so of course, there's your cerebral spinal fluid and it flows, right? And likewise, we're aligning the spine, but in a different way, because unlike cracking or doing anything like that, and I know there's other maneuvers of chiropractic too, but this is specifically dealing with listening to where the fascia needs to let go, because especially for hypermobile people, super huge. A lot of them, maybe not a lot, maybe that's a bad word. There are some people that are discovering that they have something called craniocervical instability,
Yeah.
where they're typically hypermobile, if not always. I just don't want to be incorrect there. And the fascia and connective tissue is a little different. They tend to be very extra sensitive to a lot of things in life, which makes it harder. They're usually more tired. They don't even necessarily know this is what's going on, but sometimes they feel like their neck is barely attached to their head, or, so when they have things that are forceful, even sometimes massage can be, a little too much. Even craniosacral, sometimes I have found I've recommended it to people and they're like, no, that caused a huge flare up. We have to be so careful because sometimes we get in our heads as practitioners that we need to do more. We live in a world where everything requires more force, more pressure. We got to do something. You have to, in order to create impact.
Yeah.
And the fascia just needs to be listened to so it can unwind where it knows it can, to withhold that, to actually hold that adjustment. Because
Mm.
otherwise, what's going to happen is it goes right back, right? And then that's why people find themselves having to do this. Now, nothing wrong with it. I still think chiropractic is helpful. I think the thing though about it is that this allows that inner alignment for you too. And when that cerebral spinal fluid is flowing without restrictions that it's been dealing with, it's like people remember who they are. They
Mm.
remember their power and they begin to take their power back and they go, I don't have to do it that way. I get to create my own way if I have to because this is what I need. It takes time, but the more that people are able to get that inner alignment, the more and it doesn't mean they have to continue doing craniosacral. I mean, my journey unfolded that was like the beginning of this rapid unfolding that continued where it was like, I have to advocate for myself because who else is going to? Nobody else
Right.
is living in my bodies. If I need if I'm going on a trip, I know I might not be able to participate in all the things because I know I'm going to need a nap because I know I need time to process.
Mm.
Chalk that up to being, sensory sensitive, whatever you want. I need to listen because I know I need downtime in order to be at my best. It just, you become aware of what your non-negotiables are, and the things that you thought were hard to make non-negotiables just become easier.
Which is funny because I always ask, what's your non-negotiables for the day?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we need them. We don't think though.
Yeah.
I mean, especially as women, um, a lot of us have had to like remain quiet and small, and there's oftentimes a lot of sexual and domestic violence that happens with women, and
Yeah.
so it's just so many times that they just don't even know, like, is it okay to have a non-negotiable?
Right.
Like, yeah, it is. I mean, sometimes even if it's as simple as I'm going to pee when I need to pee at work. I
Right.
mean, like, it
Right.
can be as simple as that. But
Mhm.
I say that from a perspective of somebody who worked in sales before my light, so it was like my nervous
Yeah.
system was already primed because that was not where I needed to be, right? Just working in timeshare sales in Central Florida. Like, I was good at it, but man, was my like butterflies in my stomach, sweaty armpits, like
Yeah.
all my body signs were like,
Get out of this.
not the
Yeah.
best use of your energy. But I would go on tour and I'd be like sipping my coffee and, drinking loads of it because that's what I'm trying to act nonchalant and I'm not being authentic and I'm putting on and I'm having to pee so bad, but I'm so close. They're so close and I can't leave. And now they're doing paperwork and it's been 5 hours and I haven't peed. I could never do that as somebody post having a child, but you know what I mean? It's those little ways that we're telling our
Into
body,
our body.
you're not
Yeah.
important right now.
Yeah.
Or like when my stomach would hurt so bad in the mornings, and I would have such nausea. Now I realize it's like blood sugar and some other things, but I had to go and realize through a therapist who helped me, she was like, what if you were to see your younger self? Like, what do you do when you see your younger self? And we might have been in like a hypnotic type of place. And I'm like, I want to run to her and hug her. And she goes, that's awesome, because sometimes people just want to run away. And that's, further work. Right. And I was like, oh
Yeah.
no, I want to like hug the crap out of her and save her. And she's like, okay, we're in a good place. But she goes, so when you're feeling that way, like I would feel so nauseous and my stomach would hurt so bad. And I would start to lose weight so rapidly that sometimes it would feel like my stomach would concave, but I realize now it was my fascia tightening and my diaphragm going up, which is why it would be hard to breathe. And I would be in a concave position. It would be hard to stand up straight. So the thought of getting up and going to the kitchen to like think about what I want to eat when like nothing really appeals when I'm in that place. And I will say for me, kefir milk saved my life, because when I'm in that place,
Mm.
that's been the thing I can give myself: protein, carbs, sugar. Like I can handle giving a little bit to my stomach, which allows my body to go, okay, we're safe. Now I have an appetite. Now I can actually feel my appetite, because sometimes I couldn't
Yeah.
feel it. That was weird too. How do I explain that? Like that was so odd.
Yeah.
Listen to my like little child. Like I would
Listen to it.
never
Yeah.
tell my child, no, I'm not, because my stomach hurts. I'm not going to get up and feed you. Right.
Right.
I'd find a way. And so I
Right.
had to start doing that for myself. It was like little love notes to myself that I got your back. We'll be
To
okay.
understand that your needs matter and you matter, right? And your body matters.
And to
Yeah.
constantly communicate that with
Yeah.
yourself,
Yeah.
and that it's safe to eat.
What is one thing people can do every day, thinking of that, of loving your body, to treat their fascia?
Mm. That's so good. There's so many different ways nowadays, but I think one of my favorites is really just being present with your body. So even just, I know we do a lot of this in like yoga and breath work, like hand on heart, hand on stomach, but we're always probably like being a little bit not thinking about our pressure is where I'm going to go with that. So I would like everybody even just to like consider just, even holding onto your stomach, or, if you've had a C-section, or if you're a woman, just holding onto that space, or onto your heart space. If you've gone through grief, onto your chest, and just see how lightly you can touch yourself. Like
Mm,
barely even where you can perceive that you're even touching yourself, that like where your nervous system almost is like, is somebody here? Like that
okay.
space. And sit there for about 1 to 4 minutes and see if that doesn't start your body having like some type of release under your hands, whether you feel that, whether you have a deep breath, whether you feel the need to let out a cry. It might not happen. Don't get all excited. Sometimes people are like, I'm going to go cry, but it can. And that sometimes really surprises people. Like, what the heck? I'm barely doing anything. Or stomach noises, that's a great indication. I mean, especially as somebody who struggled with feeling an appetite, that's a wonderful way to engage my brain body connection, and to also just let my body know that I'm with it for the day.
Right. Beautiful. Where can people find you?
Okay, so I am located in the Bradenton, Sarasota area. So that's my physical location. I'm on Instagram as the holistic_alchemist. And holistic is spelled HOLLYSTIC, because I added my name in there. But yeah, that's where you can find me. And I am going to be putting out more things for people who aren't local, because I just want to be able to share so much that I have learned, and, self help tips, even like more into what you were just asking. I've been doing workshops because I just think it's important for us even to remember that our body is alive. Like there's this live living, it's not just, oh, we hear this, right? But like I feel like this takes it to another level that we can kind of engage with. And even foam rolling. Foam rolling is a great way. Some
Mm.
people don't really want to, they're like, oh, it hurts.
I
The
resisted
reason
that for so
why,
long.
the reason it hurts is because your fascia is tight. And in those
Yeah.
instances, the fascia wants less pressure. So it can be difficult if you're on the floor, like trying to roll out your leg and you are just leaning on it, right? Like you almost really have to use your core and pull yourself up a little bit and not be as much on it,
Mm,
And I will say broader to smaller is the best way to go. So if you're tight, don't start with a tennis ball on your leg. That's Not unless you know what you're doing and you're going into specific places. That's asking for pain. But a big, thick foam roller into something smaller because, you know, you want to be able to get into the spots that are like the little nodules and just sit there.
Yeah.
And sometimes not with more pressure. Maybe you got to release a little bit, like right under your hamstring. I roll with a tennis ball and I sit on it and I get right where like it meets the cheek, right?
Yeah.
And you sit like a lot of people have tension there. And I'll kind of roll on the ball a little bit and lift your leg a little bit and see if you can't get that ball to sink. Breathe, go with your tissue and see if you can't get it to more and more and more. Because where that emotion is hiding is in there, you know, in that little nodule, that adhesion that's deep, that fascia that's really tight that nobody's getting to, you can get to for yourself.
I like that.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And I think that's how I found you too, was your little tidbits on Instagram.
Oh,
So,
thank you.
yeah.
Last tidbit, just because I think it's helpful. On your chest, everybody can hold onto their chest underneath their clavicle and just, everybody knows about a neck stretch, but if you hold
Mhm.
right under there and actually like hold here, don't, you know, don't be
Yeah.
afraid to do that. And then lift and lift your chin
Oh.
towards the ceiling or even like to the
Oh,
side.
yeah, that feels good. Yeah.
That is such a great way to open up not only the fascia, but the lymphatics and the blood flow and all of the stuff that's in our neck. And we
Right.
all need that. So I just want to leave you with that.
Beautiful. Thank you. Well,
Yeah.
thank you
Thank
so
you so
much for
much.
coming. It was a great conversation. I could keep on talking forever, but
Thank you for having me. It was great. It was great to speak with you.